All right, good morning. Good morning. So I don't really, jump onto YouTube to kind of give these kind of videos too much, but I really wanted to share what is going on for us long-term holders of Bitcoin. And if you're not a long-term holder of Bitcoin, why I kind of urge you to get in. So at the moment, we're finding Bitcoin at about 111,600 on October 15th. So what's interesting now is that there's been like a relatively recently, there was of course a big dip in the price of Bitcoin from an all-time high of about 127 down to 102, liquidating like 20 billion position in open interest. But this really provides like one of the best buying opportunities I've seen in a long while. So to give a little bit of background about myself, I'm probably what you consider a Bitcoin minnow, holding like just like 10 BTC or whatever. But that's something that I'd love to build upon, and I don't really recommend going into like perpetual positions and like liquidatable positions because everybody in my earlier trading days I realized that if you can get liquidated, you definitely will get liquidated, and that has happened to pretty much anybody that's really been a short-term trader, I'd say, in Bitcoin. And I think that the number of liquidations recently was pretty telling of where the market was kind of sitting. People like trying to get serious amounts of leverage. Not just like 2x leverage, but as high as like 100x leverage. With a lot of people falling in the 10x leverage kind of territory because of this. So market's just opened and it's opened relatively strong. So in the short run, which doesn't really matter, but we'll look at it anyway. 111,900 now, so we're getting a little bit of push up, and this is kind of the reason why I wanted to go live right now, because I feel that today is maybe a good entry point before I think people are looking for shorts and short term stuff, but in reality, this is a good buying opportunity. That's kind of the short of this. So, this is kind of what I look at for Bitcoin. And okay, so this is a 1 day chart looking at a very long time frame. And to me, you got to go all the way back to the era of when Bitcoin was at around 20,000. So let's go way back here. And this is probably the last time that that we actually saw this kind of buying position. Fair enough, in August of last year, I think that dip there was also a great position to have bought at. But really, after this whole FTX bankruptcy, that was one of the great entry points. And where is that? Okay, down here. And we've seen these kind of little buckets that are formed, after a crash, right? So we got one there, maybe one here, maybe one here, maybe one here. So these are all the entry points that I'd like to show. This orange line here represents Bitcoin's path to 1 million, which, I think on an optimistic kind of a time horizon, you could imagine that it's going to hit 1 million at some point. And, there are many philosophies and theories about when. I'd like to like put a bullish kind of statement out there and say that this could happen as soon as April 2028, which is the next halving date for Bitcoin. And I think that, halving aside, I think that's a good milestone for Bitcoin. I think that maybe 1 million might be a bit strong, but, that's what I've drawn this orange line to, in the hopes that maybe one day Bitcoin will be worth 1 million. Well, not just one day, that day. And, this is a long time frame here. This is going back to 2022 all the way to today. And, here we go. Here's my orange line going all the way up with that projection. So in addition to that, I think that it would be fair to say Bitcoin is a volatile, a volatile thing. So, I put these very relatively wide kind of gates around this. With these blue lines here saying that Bitcoin just generally trades between this in this channel, right? But we can see that it's clearly an uptrend channel over time, and as of recent, this dip down here, it actually hasn't gone outside of what I think is a reasonable volatility channel. And I don't think it ever will go outside of this volatility channel, to be honest. And, although it seems like Bitcoin end of the world kind of stuff for quite a lot of people a few days ago when it hit 100,000, that was just a great entry point to me. So here we go. And, being down here with, what I perceive as a relatively optimistic but possible scenario, Bitcoin's actually probably worth 140,000 to me right now. And, of course, 40%, not quite 40%, 111 to 140 is probably like 30% undervaluation of Bitcoin, which is great because, Bitcoin's getting more and more expensive and it's getting really hard for people to get into Bitcoin. Even a relatively, comfortable person, buying like 1 Bitcoin, never mind 10 Bitcoin is a stretch, right? And, I think that the days of owning 1,000 Bitcoin, 100 Bitcoin, that's not really feasible for the average investor. But nevertheless, beware, because maybe people are owning that much Bitcoin, but, let's be real, you're not going to go from somebody that has, $1 million to 100 million, 200 million kind of dollars. That doesn't happen in any investing, except for very, very risky traders. And, I would say that in Bitcoin, if you're a risky trader, you're really playing with fire. And it's likely you'll end up with like a $0 balance one day when you wake up on your account because you got liquidated. So don't get liquidated. Bitcoin is a liquidation feeder. It always liquidates people. And, if you get liquidated, you've got no more capital to have invested in it. And, what ends up happening is each time there's one of these crashes here, your portfolio is zero. So it takes you forever to get to like the $1 million mark invested into Bitcoin, right? And, that first million is obviously very tough, but, you got to be real and just put what you currently have into spot Bitcoin or an ETF if you're like, ETF's probably pretty good for most people because it's insured, you can track it. I doubt that you need to store stuff on a cold wallet. You probably can't store stuff on a cold wallet without the risk of having it going lost. And, most people aren't financial institutions and they can't safeguard that amount of assets, before they get really concerned. So ETFs are a pretty good way to go. And then, a lot of the basics like, tax, finance, custody, all of this stuff is taken care of with I'd say a reasonable fee from the ETFs these days, which is like less than 0.5%, right? All right, so long run Bitcoin, yeah. And this orange guy, it's gonna go. I'm just drawing it all the way to the $1 million mark. Okay, let me just squeeze this a little bit more so we get 2028 into here. Ooh. All right, there we go. So based on a few years worth of data, I think we can kind of see how Bitcoin is following this orange line pretty closely, actually. Where does that bring us? It brings us to 1 million as of, in my opinion, April 2028. With, a lot of wiggle room here, fair enough. It's going to be anywhere from 700 to 1.4. So that's of course a huge range, but let's just imagine that. So we're gonna see like a return to this orange line sometime in the future. It probably will go above it, then below it, and so on. But if you're just holding straight up Bitcoin, and I'd say that the following things are having a cold wallet's one thing. You could, I suppose, have it on an exchange. Like let's say Binance or something like that. Or alternatively, you could buy an ETF, and that's just sitting in like standard brokerage for investment. So that's a very appealing way to do that. And you can just sit here and you can just wait for 2 years. That's it, man. 2 years. 2 years to get this kind of return is such a good return, right? And that I was reading a story to my kids, and it's one of those famous stories, which is the tortoise and the hare, right? So this is a tortoise and the hare game here, right? If you're gonna run, if you're gonna try and chase like this kind of gain, from like 100,000 to 1 million, you're looking for 10x, and how can you get 10x in this, you know? How can you get 10x? Nothing returns 10x, and that's like 1,000%, right? So don't think like I'm gonna earn, sorry, don't think in the short run that you're gonna earn 10x. Think on the long run you're gonna earn 10x. So if you got like $100,000 and you're investing that, you'll get there to $1 million, which is great, because to get from like 0 to 1 million is super hard. Usually people work for their entire lives, like 30 years, to get to this level, and that's a great thing to be. And then one day you can just live off your investments once you've hit, well, I'd say like a couple $1 million, right? If you're already there, if you've already got your $1 million, you can perhaps step up one level, which I'd say is the 1 million to the $10 million range in terms of your portfolio. So this is already good enough to get you up one level and one multiple. And then after 10 million, I guess there are people out there that then think, okay, 10 million to 100 million, or 100 million to a billion and stuff like that. But yeah, so that all applies here, and it's great because you can kind of invest that kind of money into Bitcoin. You can easily buy like $1 million worth of Bitcoin. You can easily buy $100 million worth of Bitcoin, and this investment curve stays true. You see, and that's the beauty of this, because you got all these other things that you could invest in, like companies and so on. And to see a company that does get a huge market cap, let's say like Google or something like that. Multiple trillions of dollars, to get from $3 trillion to $30 trillion for Google is a big ask, considering where it is already. And I mean, the only way it's going to get there is through increasing in price because of inflation or something like that. Well, I mean, not only does Bitcoin go up because of inflation, but it also goes up because of many other reasons, such as the ongoing trend to move away from like other types of things like real estate and so on, and then starting to invest into Bitcoin, which seems to be occurring in our future generation, right? Okay, so that all said, what I'm saying is that we are in a great era now, because I'd say over possibly the next 3 months. So these things, like, every time you look at a crash, it's like 3 months of this sideways kind of action here until we finally reclaim the previous high that we saw, right? So you'll see it go all the way down. You'll see 3 months of like struggle and uncertainty, and then what you get is a step up, right? So Bitcoin always steps up, and then it reclaims that all-time high, and then starts on this trend towards the upside. This is where you want to be in this section here. It's very hard to try and guess, when's it gonna skyrocket off for 1 or 2 days, because that kind of stuff is difficult to time, right? But now that you get this bucket here, you get a whole window of a couple of months, and of course you want to I don't think it matters if you join early in that or late in that. If you join earlier in it, you might become impatient, but that's okay, right? As long as you can kind of get in before the step up, and then just don't short and do all these trades. Just hold on to that position, and you can either get lucky with another step up, after it's kind of gone up here. There's a tiny step up, but and then you don't need to short this to go down, because as we can see again and again, it just steps up every now and then. So overall the all-time high just keeps going up here, and sitting at 110 now. I really think that you shouldn't be thinking, oh, can I sell at 120, 130, or oh, should I wait for it to dump it until it hits 70 or something like that. I mean, I think that if we go sub 100, that's fine too. But just be in a position such that you can kind of stomach that kind of drop by 10, 20, 30%, and that of course is holding spot Bitcoin, or or if you're like me and you think that Bitcoin's going to outperform over the long run. Kind of consider what kind of risk you're able to take if you are going to take a leverage position. And I would really say that if you're going for over 2x leverage, that's very, very risky. And, you got to recheck in what you're doing, and you got to be like, okay, you know what? My portfolio used to be worth tons. I'm only worth like 20K at the moment. So I need to revenge trade my way back to like 100K before I can start seriously investing. But, investing is a long game, man. Just tortoise in the hair. Just if you bought if you bought your Bitcoin way back here, when it was 20K, and you've seen like a 6x increase, that is amazing in the investing world. This is not like casino stuff where you go. I mean, it is like a casino in a way, but it's not where you earn like 100x. So if you got like $2,000, to think that you're going to turn that into $1,000,000 is definitely a position and a mindset that's going to end you up with more likely $0 at the end of all of this, as opposed to $2,000,000. You got to be real about these kind of things. However, if you can think to yourself, you know what, if $2,000 becomes $20,000, that's great, and you can't do this in any other investment, then I think that's more level-headed. And so I'm kind of really urging people to recognize that Bitcoin is a liquidation feeder. You are going to get liquidated if you're going to do that kind of stuff. But, if you're content with something like a 10x return, which is amazing, you should totally do that, right? And, you're not going to see that across any other asset classes at this time, at least sustainably for a long, long run, right? So, I mean, yeah, that's really all I want to jump into to say here. So, I've been watching Bitcoin for a long, long time, and, I wish I was never distracted by, all of this, perpetual contracts, altcoins and stuff like that. Because to be honest, that's all money that I've thrown in the bin, and, I should not be like where I am, in my opinion. Looking back, I was like, ugh, man, ultimately, if I held like 500 Bitcoin, that would be so much better, as opposed to, trying to get these short wins along the way. But that was the past. I've gone through this whole liquidation thing before, and you can't get distracted. That's the main thing. Don't get distraction. Don't buy perpetual. Don't buy some Ethereum and stuff like that, which is basically trading like a meme coin. Definitely no altcoins. I mean, if anything, I think the shorting the altcoin memes is a valid trading thing if you're looking for short-term gains, because let's face it, if it's got nothing behind it and it's just a meme, what investment strategy is that, right? It's got zero value and you're hoping for it to just go up like Bitcoin. I mean, come on, right? There's no actual work behind any of that, and it's never going to really become a long-term serious investment. That's like speculative stuff, and if you're speculating, you can do it on the crypto market. You can go to a casino. That's fine, But meme coins ultimately gonna go to zero, right? Or at least 50% haircuts on their price, 50% losses on their price. So if you're a short-term trade, short your meme coins. Again, so volatile there. If you're gonna do it using leverage, just be aware of potential risks there. But I think that's a fairly steady minus 10x if you're going to hold that for a couple of years. All right. So anyway, calling it here in 2025. I think we got a couple of years ahead of us before we can see 1 million, but I think we are still on track for that. And yeah, I guess that's that.